In July 1914, the Russian and German empires entered a war. For emperors on both sides, it was a routine short war, such that German Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm II told his forces that before the winter, when the leaves begin to drop, you will be back to your homes. On the other hand, the army of Tsar Russia was worried that it was a war of some days, and they had to put off their heavy, shambled uniforms after victory. Then the routine smart uniforms, wherein we look like heroes, should be carried or be brought from home via couriers from Berlin after victory, so that they do not have to carry this burden on the way. But factually, most young men in these forces were those who were seeing their family members for the last time. Now, no parcel had to reach from their homes. Rather, their bodies were to be parceled back home. It was not only the leaves falling season, but also many winters and snowfall periods they were going to spend in trenches. Since this war of a few days for the emperors was going to spread over 1566 days. The same war, history named it first time the Great War, and today we call it the First World War. It was the day on June 28, 1914, when at 11 a.m. an open-roof car emerged from the town hall of the Bosnian capital, Sarajevo. The Crown Prince of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and his spouse Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, were traveling. On the seat beside the driver was sitting Bosnian military governor Oskar Potjerek. Franz Ferdinand was a bit crossed. While coming from town hall in the morning, a bomb was hurled at his car. The prince, acting sharply, had thrown away the bomb with his arm, but instead of falling away, the bomb had dropped at the rear car. It injured some of his companions. Franz Ferdinand was going to the hospital to know their well-being when the military governor in the car suddenly realized that they were on the wrong way. So he ordered the driver to turn the car. The driver slowed down the car to turn it. But before he would turn the direction, suddenly two fires were shot. One shot pierced through Prince's neck. The second bullet hit his spouse Sophie in the belly. Both did not feel anything, but suddenly the prince leaned down holding his neck. His wife in panic asked, "What has happened to you?" While asking this, she herself slipped down the seat. The prince saw this and cried, "Sophie dear, don't die. You have to live for our children." But Sophie then said nothing and became quiet. The security surrounded their car, and Prince continued to say nothing has happened. But saying so, he himself became quiet and fell unconscious.
The injured royal couple was rushed to the hospital with the doctors after a quick examination that both are dead. The next day when the newspapers published this news, it also carried a big bang of war. Because it was not a murder of just two persons, but it had a story behind it. In 1914, four powers prevailed on the map of Europe: the Russian Empire of Tsar Russia, the Ottoman Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the German Empire. Central and Eastern Europe was either in possession of these powers or comprised of smaller states separated from them. Particularly, Poland was divided among Russia, Germany, and Austria. Apart from them, Britain and France were also major powers at that time, but their empires were outside Europe. Austria was the biggest empire in the Central Europe, which included Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and many European countries. But this empire had a problem that in its south and east, a number of new states had come into being, like Serbia and Romania, etc. They all had independence from the Ottoman Empire. The Serbians among them belonged to the Slavic race, and Slavics were in a majority in the Austrian Empire. That is why Serbia wanted Slavic nationals in the Austrian Empire should be included in Serbia and a greater Serbia be formed, which they would call Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia stood for the land of the South Slavic people. So in order to realize the dream of Yugoslavia, the first target of the Serbs was Bosnia, a territory of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In 1878, this territory was taken away from the Ottoman Empire, and in 1907, it was formally annexed into the empire. Serbia protested this act of Austria. Propaganda was also unleashed in Serbia against Austria. In order to separate Bosnia from Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Serb nationalists had also started an underground movement. The Black Hand was the central group of this movement, which under the patronage of Serb intelligence was set up in Serbia. Their logo was a fearful sign showing a skull, bones, a bottle of poison, a dagger, and a bomb. The group was formed for armed struggle. A branch of this group was called Young Bosnia, comprised of young Serbians, mostly teenagers, living in Bosnia. These passionate youngsters, with the help of the intelligence agency, would carry out terrorist activities in Bosnia. The plot to kill the Austrian crown prince was also made by this group. The pistol used to fire at the royal couple was provided to them by Serb intelligence. A total of 6 assassins took part in this killing plot with the help of many locals. The person who fired at Prince Frank Ferdinand and his wife was a 19-year-old Serb student, Gavrilo Princip. He was arrested on the spot after firing. This picture you see is mostly mistaken for the arrest scene of Gavrilo Princip, but factually, it is the arrest scene of another suspect on the spot. It is not that of the actual killer Gavrilo. Anyway, Gavrilo was taken into custody but was not convicted to death because under the Austrian law, under 20 could not be awarded death. So Gavrilo was sentenced to jail for 20 years, but he was a tuberculosis patient and died naturally 4 years after being in jail.
In 2015, Serbian President Tomislav Nikolic unveiled the statue of Gavrilo in Belgrade and declared him a national hero. For the Hungarian Empire, the killing of the crown prince and his wife was an unusual matter because the same person was the future emperor. His 3 little children had also become orphans. The whole empire was mourning, and on July 4th, the last rituals of the royal couple were performed in Vienna. Thousands had the last look at their face. Then their coffins were taken 122 kilometers away to Archduke Castle for burial. It was a tragic historical incident in Austria in which the Serb intelligence assisted. In retaliation, the Austrian Empire wanted to destroy Serbia. You look at this propaganda cartoon, wherein a bomb and dagger has been shown in the hands of Serbia, and the Austrian hand is crushing it. On its side is written, "Serbia must die." This cartoon clearly shows Austria's mood. But despite this threatening mood, Austria was not able to cause any harm to Serbia. The reason being that, although Serbia was a small and weak country, it was a friend of her power like Russia. The Russian Empire had declared itself the protector of the Orthodox Christian population in Central and Eastern Europe, including the Balkans. Serbia was also an Orthodox Christian, while Austrian rulers were Protestants. Therefore, Russia was a natural ally of the Serbian rulers. How deeply they were related could be assessed from the fact that Russia had liberated Serbia from the Ottoman Empire in 1878. In simple words, at that time, 2 major defense alliances existed in Europe. The first alliance was Russia, France, and Britain, called Triple Entente, or Three Nations Alliance. The second alliance was of Austria, Germany, and Italy, called Triple Alliance. It was decided in the complex military alliance game that war between any 2 countries will be fetch all into it. All allies and enemies were to get into the war no matter whether or not the war was caused by them. As this cartoon published at that time also apprehended that if Austria attacked Serbia, Russia will attack Austria and Germany on Russia, and behind them France and Britain will also rush. It means they all realize that the war may have any cause, all world powers will be constrained to get involved in it. A great war will take place. It is an irony that the British King George V, German Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm II, and the Russian ruler Tsar Nicholas II were cousins in relation. All traced their bloodline from Queen Victoria from the paternal or maternal side. But this relationship failed to turn the direction of the situation. This was the background. Austria, in order to avenge the killing of the royal couple, needed German help against Serbia. That is, if Russia moves to protect Serbia, Germany will stand against it. Germany assured Austria that in case of war with Russia, it will fully help Austria. This reply satisfied the old Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph I. Now he was at liberty to teach a lesson to Serbia.
The Archduke Ferdinand, who was murdered, was a quite peaceful person. He would always talk of avoiding wars. He was even sympathetic to the Slavic Serbs and other communities. The parliamentary government under the Austrian emperor, he supported therein maximum representation of the Slavics.
From this perspective, the Serbs had not only killed a crown prince, rather they silenced a voice which might have saved Europe from World War and was its ally. Now the same happened which had been after the assassination of peaceful people, that is, a world war. The war began with ultimatums and strict warnings. On Friday, July 23rd, the Austrian foreign minister in Belgrade handed over the document of ultimatum to his Serb counterpart. A demand was made in this document that all involved in the murder of the royal couple be strictly punished. All underground movements working against Austria be subjected to a crackdown. Propaganda against Austria should be stopped and action taken against public servants involved in the propaganda. Arms supply to Austrian territory be stopped. Serbia was given 48 hours to reply to this ultimatum. Along with the ultimatum, Austria also started war preparations, so a pressure could be maintained. Army and naval mobilization also started, and at least pre-Austrian naval ships got positions at Europe's world-known the river Danube. The Danube is the second largest river in Europe, which starting from Germany goes up to the Black Sea. It also passes through the Austrian capital Vienna and the Serbian capital Belgrade. These ships sailed in the Danube River and passed through the Austrian Empire, entered Serbia and reached near Belgrade and got ready for bombardment. Serbia did not have anything to stop them. Around 360,000 Austrian soldiers had also reached the Serbian border. Serbia had 20,000 or less number of soldiers. The Serbian army was insufficient to fight the Austrian army, but Serbia greatly trusted its ally Russia. Then it also recruited lakhs of volunteers. This implied that Serbia was minded to fight, yet it did not straightaway reject the Austrian ultimatum. Rather, it gave a circuitous reply to it. Serbia said it desired friendly ties with Austria, and it will concede to every demand of Austria and Hungary, which can help the neighboring states to end the unrest. That is, as a civilized country, it is the responsibility of the Serbian government to take every step with sincerity to promote good ties with Austria. Apparently, it was a positive reply. But it did not mention that organizations and officials against whom Austria has sought action would be checked through a crackdown. So Austria rejected this response and severed diplomatic ties with Serbia. The situation deteriorated and martial law was claimed in the Austrian capital, Vienna, on July 27th. The next day, on July 28th, Austria declared war on Serbia. The declaration of war. In Belgrade, the Serb government was also handed over the war documents. The First World War was underway. When Serbia was attacked, its ally Russia also began to move its army. Before Russia could attack, Germany on August 1 declared war on Russia. German ambassador Jacob Frederick in the Russian capital St. Petersburg gave the declaration of war to the Russian foreign minister Suzunov. The Russian foreign minister told the German ambassador that for declaring this war, every nation will curse you. It goes that, on feeling the intensity of these words, the German ambassador began to weep, because he too knew that starting was easy, but no one knew how to end it. But obviously he could not stop the war, as such a war was waged. 2 days later, on August 3, Germany also declared war on France. After Germany attacked Russia and France, the ally of both, Britain, could not remain on the fence. The next day, on August 4, Britain also declared war on Germany. On August 5, Austria started war against Russia. It means within a week, the whole of Europe was involved in war. Only Italy, an important ally of Germany and Austria, was posing neutrality. It was a big jolt for both the powers, however, they did not take immediate action on it.
They continued war for their dead sure about their victory. The first bullet of the World War had been fired with the high hope of its early end. But the Austrian government committed a blunder at the initial of the war. That was, 2 or 3 days before the war started, commander of the Serbian army, Field Marshal Radomir Putnik, was present in a city of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Budapest, which now is in Hungary. He wanted to reach Serbia at the earliest to command his army, but the Austrians arrested him. General Radomir was a seasoned and experienced commander. It was easy for Austria to defeat Serbia had he been taken a prisoner, and the war would also have come to an early end as per its desires. But the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph released the held enemy. Rather, he was also provided safe passage to return to Serbia. His gesture was from the principle that arresting a guest at home is not bravery, not matter if he is an enemy. But this adherence to principles cost him heavily. General Putnik reached Serbia and took over command of his army. and he commanded in a way that apparently a weak Serbian army became an ironclad wall before the army of the Austrian Empire. The Austrian ships deployed at the river Danube in the first place took to heavy indiscriminate bombardment at Belgrade city. After that, infantry crossed over to Serbia through a number of points. Serbia had nil chance of victory before the strong army of Austria, but the Serbian army began to give a tough time to Austrians at every front. Serbian Sur Mountains near Bosnia became the most important battleground. In this battle from August 15 to 24, the Serbian army defeated the Austrian army. Of 200,000 Austrian soldiers, 10,000 were killed, 30,000 of them were wounded, while 30,000 were taken prisoners. As many as 5,000 Serbian soldiers were killed of a total of 180,000, and 15,000 were injured. This defeat shattered the Austrian dream of routing Serbia right away. After that, the Serbian forces threw the Austrian army out of their territory. The next month, in September, Austria again attacked Serbia through Bosnia. They crossed River Drina on the way and also achieved some military successes, but the Serbs defeated them again. The Austrian army second retreated from the Bosnian side. On October 24, after preparations of a month, the Austrians attacked again. This attack was more successful than the last two. The Austrian forces advanced much inside the Serbian territory. On November 2, 1914, the Austrians captured the capital Belgrade. The Serbian army retreated from Belgrade. However, a few days after, they launched a counterattack. From November 16 to December 15, on the banks of River Kolubara, a fierce battle took place. As many as 30,000 Austrian and 22,000 Serbian soldiers were killed in this fight. But this war ended with a grand victory of the Serbs. Serbians captured 76,000 Austrian soldiers. After that, they also regained possession of Belgrade, and by December end once again turned the Austrians completely out of Serbia. Not only that, but some Austrian territories near Belgrade were also captured by the Serbs. These were very disgraceful defeats to Austria. The myth of theirs being a big power had been dashed to the ground. Worried, Austria resorted to Germany for help. After German military help and preparations for months, Austria again assaulted Serbia on October 15. Next year, Field Marshal August Maxen was the German commander. This time around, Bulgaria, disgruntled with Serbia, was also with it. Over it, the Allied also published propaganda cartoons that Bulgaria has factually stabbed Serbia in the back. The combined attack of three states proved a success. Within 3 months, by January 1916, including Belgrade, the entire Serbia had fallen to Austria and its allies. After suffering heavy losses, the Serbian army from neighboring Albania had retreated to Greece. By that time, Greece was impartial in the war, but it gave the refuge to the Serbian army on its land. After conquering Serbia, its territory was divided into Austrian and Bulgarian occupation zones.
The land in the grey area came under Austrian control, while the green one to Bulgarian, which means the Serbian account was over by January 1916. But Serbia, in fact, was a minor player in the Great War. The actual fight was among the big players, which was now going on the Western Front. The German Schlieffen Plan was in full swing. Under this plan, France was to be occupied completely within 40 days and the war was to be declared over. What happened to the Schlieffen Plan and what it actually was? Field Marshal Alfred von Schlieffen was the German commander. He had been commander of the German forces from 1891 to 1906. He had worked out a great strategy to occupy France. War strategies against enemies are made even during the peace days. Such a plan, the Schlieffen Plan, was also designed by General Schlieffen. As per the plan, the German forces would not attack directly on the French border, but on the northwestern side via Belgium, they would enter France. The attack would be so swift that before the French forces could get ready, the German forces would reach Paris and take over the capital.
Hence, the French army in the west of Paris, spread up to the German border, would be surrounded by the Germans and destroyed. And if the plan is executed accordingly, the Germans will quickly get a decisive victory. The war will be over soon with minimum military losses. This plan was made by General Schlieffen. But the problem is, in 1914, the plan was alive, but General Schlieffen was no more. So the succeeding commanders altered the plan a little bit. The original plan envisaged the occupation of the Netherlands, but in the altered plan, this part was excluded from the original plan. Instead, an attack was planned from the smaller states, Luxembourg and Belgium. According to this amended Schlieffen Plan, the German forces on August 2nd captured Luxembourg. Meanwhile, an ultimatum was also sent to Belgium that the German forces should be permitted to pass through Belgium. It warned of strict action if permission was not given to the Germans, which meant they would use force. But the Belgian King Albert I refused to give passage to the Germans. Belgium in this war was a neutral country, and Britain was the guarantor to it. That if anyone would attack Belgium and try to end its neutrality, it will have to fight Britain, which means having a war with it. So, after refusing Germany, Belgium sought help from Britain. In the meantime, Germany declared war and entered forces into Belgium. As a result, Britain also had to declare war, and it was an actual fact you just learned. After the formal declaration of war, the German army very swiftly began to act on the Schlieffen Plan. As per the altered plan, when the First World War began, tanks, armored vehicles, and fast-action trucks were not in military use. Mostly the troops moved on foot or used cavalry for this purpose. In order to pull heavy guns and machine guns, horses, donkeys, and even dogs were used. Trains were also used for military transports, but their ratio was quite low, because railway tracks were available everywhere. The Schlieffen Plan might have worked accordingly had the Germans fast mobility, but the absence of modern means of transport slowed their plan at the start. When the German army attacked Belgium to move ahead to France, its first major encounter with the Belgian army took place in the city of Liege. The Belgian army had erected at least 16 strong forts around the city. All forts had heavy guns installed. From August 5 to 16, the Belgian army resolutely countered the Germans.
Thousands of soldiers were killed on both sides. The Germans exhaustively attacked the city with the airships, also called Zeppelins. The Germans ultimately captured the city after fierce fighting of 11 days. Then the Germans advanced and held another major city in Belgium. Meanwhile, the Britain army had also entered Belgium through France. The French, the British, and the Belgian forces from South Belgium to the whole German border areas launched attacks on a massive scale. The fight is called Battle of the Frontiers. Nevertheless, the Germans repulsed all attacks and succeeded in entering France. In a Belgian city, Mons, the German army faced the British, wherein the British had a crushing defeat. Now, the British and the French forces from the side of Belgium were being fast defeated and retreated to France. This process of stepping back was called at that time the Great Retreat. Chasing the retreating forces, the Germans entered 150 kilometers inside France. Soon, the Germans stood 40 kilometers off Paris in the east. Besides Belgium, the German forces had also entered France through its own land. Now, Switzerland, located between Paris and Germany, which as neutral in the war, was the place where German forces had reached. Against them was the French army, which had taken a defensive position. When the British army, here on the map, was present at this place. It appeared Paris would be in the hands of the Germans in 40 days. This meant the Germans would surround the French and the British armies. As this map shows, after that, the Allied powers would either have surrendered or been completely destroyed. Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and their friendly states were called the Central Powers in World War. Britain, France, and Russia, with their associates, were called Allied powers. So in the series, Central Powers will stand for Germany, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and their friendly countries. And the mention of Allied will mean Britain, France, Russia, and their allies.
Now, the Central Forces, that is, German forces, had advanced to the extent that was heartrending for France and Britain, which are the Allied powers. Their forces' morale was down, but here the Germans, with high morale, committed a mistake that changed the whole complexion of war. After reaching so near Paris, the Germans, in their military positions, made changes. Consequently, between the positions of the German forces, see here on the map, a huge gap was created. It was around 50 kilometers. Fewer German soldiers in this vacuum were not enough to counter the attack. The Allied powers soon learned about this gap. Airplanes had been invented by then, and France had turboplanes. France used these planes for surveillance of the enemy. These aircraft had spotted the gaps in the ranks of the enemy and photographed the gaps and sent them to the high command. The French and the British decided to make full use of the enemy's weakness. Their commanders entered the forces into that gap. It is called the First Battle of Marne. The Allied forces in the gap badly trampled the small German force. Then, on the right side, away from Paris, they attacked the Germans in Verdun. With it, many troops of the Allied powers in the north, exactly behind the Germans, occupied the bridges of River Marne. Had these troops spread on both sides of the river, as seen on the map, they would have surrounded the German forces. That, the Germans going to surround the Allied, were being themselves surrounded. Now the Germans had the only option, that is, to capture Paris and cut off the supply line of the enemy, as the Allied whole supply was via Paris. The control of Paris to the Germans meant the Allied army spread in France would become paralyzed.
In the east of Paris, the first German was present near the city. Against it, the defense of Paris was being done by the French Sixth Army. The Germans made a forceful attack on this French army, and it appeared the German forces will enter the city anytime. Looking Paris under threat, the French government on September 2 shifted the entire official staff to the 600-kilometer away city of Bordeaux. It meant the government fled the city where martial law was declared. But the military governor of Paris, Joseph Gallienne, saved the city from destruction. Reports of the imminent success of the Germans were pouring into the city, so immediate reinforcement by the Allied was sought to front. The city was without public transport except 600 taxis and truck-like vehicles, while trains were also there. Gallienne ordered the taxi driver to rush the soldiers from the city to the front. Apart from that, soldiers were also transported through truck-like vehicles. The taxi drivers in 4s and 5s began to carry the soldiers to the war front. Within 2 days, over 6,000 soldiers reached the battlefield. And they reached timely. The arrival checked the advance of the Germans. The plan for capturing Paris in 40 days had been failed. In memory of the transport of soldiers through taxis in the French capital, even today these taxis applied. It is believed that Paris taxi drivers had changed the direction of the war. Britain and France also used this event as propaganda and to infuse spirit in people. The models of these taxis were placed in museums and monuments created. But historians do not agree these taxis had played a decisive role in the Paris War. The reinforcements sent to the front through these taxis perhaps was scant. For historians, the German retreat did not happen by the soldiers who came through these taxis, but a fear of being surrounded, which forced them to retreat. It means the Sixth Army did not defeat the Germans, but they retreated due to fear. Whether or not taxi service made any difference, but the Germans before Paris had soon lost the courage. They had realized immediate conquest of Paris was not possible. Overstay might also get them surrounded by the enemy. So from Paris to this point on the map, the entire German army stepped back. The parts of the river Marne yet not possessed by the Allied were used by the Germans to retreat, which was up to the river Assen behind it. They crossed the river Assen and alongside its northern bank, dug out trenches and took positions. Hence, the Germans who dreamt capture of Paris in 40 days had been retreated up to Assen in 45 days. Allied powers, that is Britain and France, which were chasing the Germans, crossed over the river from many points and attacked the central force, Germany. However, the Germans positioned in the trenches badly foiled these attacks. In the First War of Marne, 263,000 Allied soldiers were killed and wounded. The losses to the Germans were almost the same. This defeat had a very bad effect on the German High Command. It goes about the German central commander Helmuth von Moltke. that the news of defeat caused him a nervous breakdown. A sentence is also imputed to him, which he had allegedly said to the emperor. That is, His Majesty the King, we have lost this war. Emperor Wilhelm II removed him from central command on medical grounds. In his stead, Erich von Falkenhayn was made the central commander of the Germans.
The failure of the Schlieffen Plan shattered the German dream of early victory on the Western Front. In the autumn of 1914, when foliage fell from the trees the German soldiers dug their heads in the trenches' clay, were perhaps thinking, His Majesty the Emperor, what have you done this? As trenches were dug out, everyone understood that homegoing was far away. The German High Command also did not appear in haste to end the war. The Great War began to take a new turn from this point. From the end of 1914 to the start of 1915, Belgium from the sea to Switzerland, about 700 kilometers on both sides of the line, the Germans and the Allied had dug out trenches and perched therein, had taken up their positions. It was the Western Front where trench warfare had begun. In the next 4 years, millions of people lost their lives in these trenches. Despite the loss of so many lives, still no army was able to repel the other rival forces more than a few feet or meters. The trench front remained almost fixed. Actually, the Germans, in a haste to make the Schlieffen Plan a success, had committed a big mistake. They left their eastern border with Russia open. Before the gigantic military machinery of Russia, only a weak German army stood. That was not at all enough for defense. Taking advantage of this German mistake, 2 strong Russian armies entered Germany. Now the tale of homegoing before the falling of trees leaves now was going to spread over to a number of autumns. A moment also came when an emperor wept buckets. The Ottoman Empire also went into the war, and with the Allied forces it had to enter a battle at Gallipoli. We will show this account in the next episode of World War I.